In the past 2 years, the startup ecosystem has seen tremendous changes and evolutions. The post pandemic transformation of businesses and consumers has triggered a new world order. Come 2021, the startup and tech ecosystem came up with game changer business opportunities and saw a keen and increased investor attention. Case in point, the Indian startup ecosystem crossed $100 billion in funding last year. And today, we are close to getting the 100th unicorn from India. Just one more to go. There's no denying that this year is the time to tap into this momentum. And as technology changes lives and business models evolve rapidly, we welcome you to the second edition of the Makers Summit. Hello and welcome to India's largest product conference, presented by Inc42, Sears, and Google Cloud, co-presented by CleverTap and Descara, and powered by Simple and Dukan. I am Prashasti Bhatt, your host and guide at Stage A. And in the next 48 hours, we will learn all the know-how of building a scalable business from the lens of product. From the secret of super app success in e-commerce, fintech, and edtech, to the rise of quick commerce, to metaverse and blockchain apps, we've got it all for you. Now, before I tell you about the speakers we have, let's talk a little about you, our audience. We are joined here today by more than 5,000 founders, leaders, and makers. So let's have a look at the type of people we have in attendance, shall we?
तो हम तो बना लेंगे।
इस काम के लिए तो वक्त ही वक्त है।
Interesting, wasn't it? Do let me know which type are you in the comments or on Twitter with the hashtag TMS2022. For me, well, I think I related the most with parkour. Jokes aside, in this edition, we have put together more than 70 of the brightest minds behind India's fastest growing product companies. And we'll garner some actionable insights from their journey and experience through more than 30 sessions across formats, such as keynotes, chats, panels, and hands-on masterclasses. On that note, let me talk a little about our first session. To open the summit, we have a fireside chat on how India can become the center of global tech. There is no doubt that the potential in the country is massive. But how does one build locally to sell globally? How do you build products that matter? And how do you tap into this potential in India's hinterlands? Answering all of these questions is our next chat. So first, allow me to welcome the moderator of this chat, the co-founder and CEO of Inc42, Vaibhav Vardhan.
Hi, Prashasti.
Hi.
How are you? This busy
Hi.
morning.
I'm very excited actually. And on that note, Vaibhav, I want to get a little glimpse from you of what awaits us in this chat. What is it that you're trying to uncover?
I think this is the second edition of the Maker Summit we are doing, and every time we do it, it gets harder to find topics which we can go in depth because you always want to outdo yourself from the last time. Find speakers and make them talk insights, which usually is very hard to get out of them. They have a lot of insights, but to make sure that's packaged in the right way for all of our attendees is one of our tasks, and I'm sure the editorial team at Inc42, including you, have done a brilliant job at that. So that's there. Plus, largely this is the time, this is the edition we want to focus on how to decode the growth strategy of a lot of these high growing companies, right? Be it B2C tech delivery like we saw in the video, or the Web3, or the upcoming edtech post-COVID impact. So there's so many market variables which we are going through right now as a country or globally even. and how does product shaping changes over months, decades, over months, years, and decades. Understanding that from a lens of fast growing companies or hyper growth environment will be one of the key focus areas across our master classes, fireside chats, panel discussions, etc. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, that was actually a very nice intro, Vaibhav. I don't think I could have done it better. So now allow me to introduce the man who took a bootstrapped startup to the unicorn status, the man who truly believes in the homegrown potential. Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of Zoho. Hi, sir. Welcome
Hello,
to the
Sridhar.
summit.
Namaskar. Happy to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. I am sure you hate the word unicorn, and it's all about Proficon is where I heard someone last time. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining us, sir. And Prashasti, can we carry on the session?
For sure, Vaibhav, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christy.
So, thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everyone. Today we have Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of Zoho Corp. And the topic we are talking about how India can become the center of global tech. So, sir, before we go into slight depth, want to start on a lighter note. So, if I pronounce it right, and please correct me, you live in Matlam Parai. How this is how we call
Ma-
it?
Matsalampare. Matsalampare.
Matlam Parai in
Para is
Tamil
rock. Yeah.
Nadu. Okay,
Matsalam is
fair
like
enough.
Mirdangam. So Mirdangam rock, you can say.
Birmingham Rock. Okay, fair enough. And you spent 10 years in US, right? So moving to a rural village in Tamil Nadu and then running the company from there. So what does your typical routine look like on a day to day? And just want to start on a lighter note before we go in depth.
Mostly I start with a walk very early morning, like 5:30, 6 a.m. I go for a walk and a quick swim, either in the pond or the well. So that's how I start my day. And I wake up early, like 4 a.m. I get
Yeah.
some work done. Either work on my own projects or calls with our US colleagues sometimes. And then I do some exercise and then the rest of the day. So,
Wow. So I think we all will learn it the hard way. The discipline and the focus on health we all need. So you are also building a lot of your offices in rural style. So
yeah.
is it also helping in work environment productivity going back to the roots from where the place of work perspective?
Yeah. So if you look at 50,000 foot view of this now, you are, first of all, the rural infrastructure is getting better. Road connectivity, all the main roads are good. Even the last mile connectivity to the rural villages is getting better,
Yeah.
definitely. And that is being policy of the government, and that is actually working. I can see visibly the roads improving. And then the fiber optic connectivity. In fact, I'm on a fiber connection now. That is also getting better, and it's there. Then it's a question now, and talent pool. If you look at our urban areas, the talent pool is broadly drawn from smaller towns and villages anyway. So we naturally it is tempting to put all this together. Why don't we then go where the talent is? And if you look at any of the districts in India, Tenkasi, where I am, is an example. It's about 1.5 million people. That's a very typical rural district, and that's not small. That is about the same population as Estonia. And if Estonia is a player in the digital economy, any one of our districts can be. In fact, all of our districts can
Yeah.
be. Right? We have the population base, we have the intrinsic talent pool. So it's a question of how do you, surface the talent? How do you expose the talent? How do you create and nurture that? That is the real entrepreneurial challenge, and that's something that we have always seen as that as our primary challenge. So naturally, we gravitate towards these places.
Fair enough, sir. Getting into it, so setting the context from a broad lens, what direction should India take? So we all know digital technology and internet is the future globally and for India, but at the same time we have a huge trade deficit, and you have been talking about it in past few conversations over the years. And we also need focus on local manufacturing, which brings in jobs. So some would say these are starkly different directions from a R&D point of view. So how do we achieve this balance? Is it a function of paying more attention on one side? Because these are two polar opposite directions from where I look at.
Not really. I'll explain the connection. First, if you look at the R&D involved in building a piece of software, whether it's a CRM or email,
Yeah.
whatever, and the R&D involved in building a machine tool. At the R&D level, it's very similar. Actually, the activity, you are working in front of a computer, you're using various design tools. That's what you're really doing. And in the hardware space, there is of course prototyping, all of that involved. But in principle, the R&D job itself, the design and development, is very similar between software and hardware and other areas. There's more cycles involved in prototyping, but the R&D itself is actually similar. And of course, you need more layers of quality control, because in software you can quickly patch something, but in hardware, if you make a mistake, you cannot. So those are fundamental differences. But from a purely from a design point of view, the activity is similar. You can actually, in principle, set up a design studio for making some kind of hardware, even in a remote village, with a fiber optic connection, with enough compute infrastructure, right? Computers and the like. What we need is the talent and the brain power. And then there is a manufacturing, which involves factories and of that. And
Yeah.
there is, of course, people who say that land and labor and all of these, India is constrained from being a manufacturing power. I disagree. I believe if you look at our rural districts, and Tenkasi again, I'll take an example, land is not that expensive. Okay, rural land is not that expensive. And in fact, there are even cheaper districts all over India than here. So that argument goes out the window. Then labor. If you look at labor, your Chinese factory labor now is about $1,000 a month, and Indian factory labor is only maybe $300-400 a month in these places. So it's not. No, you cannot say that Chinese labor is less expensive than India. Not true. And so you are taking two big variables, land and labor, and then the rest is cost of capital and access to markets, all of that. The rural infrastructure is getting better. So at the very least, targeting local markets, and we are talking about within about 50 to 100-kilometer radius, we're talking about tens of millions of people. Okay, that's the population range in India. So even just addressing the local market, using the local land, local labor, and local manufacturing units, is not. It does seem viable to me, and for making household goods, various kinds of goods. What is missing, of course, is the know-how that we need to be able to build the factories, the know-how involved in the machinery, all of that, and then the design the products. That is another kind of know-how. And these two are purely software kind of jobs. The know-how involved in setting up a factory, figuring out the processes out, that's exactly like figuring out software. And the same way the effort involved in designing products, as I mentioned, that is a very similar to software R&D. So if you look at it, each part, the land, labor, all of that in rural areas being cheap, we already know how to do design and development. That is much like software. So we can actually be a manufacturing power. The question is, do we really want to replicate China? And I wouldn't want to. And the reason is, there is no particular reason for us to be the factory for the entire world. In other words, export a lot more than we import. So I'm not advocating that we replace China as a leading exporter. All I'm saying is that we should run a balanced trade where we export as much as we import. And because there are other reasons why I wouldn't want us to be exporting everything to everyone, because that will involve overworking our people, which is China is doing. That we don't want. In other words, we want to produce what we can consume and then sell enough so that we can import other people's goods. That balanced economy is what I seek. Manufacturing is a very critical part of the balance. We must have manufacturing. It's also very critical for rural jobs.
Fair enough. And to build on that, like you said, rural accessibility, roads are getting better, etc., etc. Similarly, on the internet side, technology side, affordability, reach, accessibility is much, much better now to the hinterlands of India. So how are you seeing from where you are sitting the behavior of rural India changing in terms of acceptability of this technology or the behavior towards the digital products at large?
If you look at our rural youth, now, that's, for example, almost every young person aspires to a motorcycle, a smartphone. And if you visit homes, farmer homes, you will have a gas stove, of course, and that's ubiquitous now. and you will see even a small refrigerator nowadays. So you do see the household products, and you can see the visible symbols of all this there, in motorcycle to smartphones to gas stoves to all of these. So that means the rural demand is there for products. Now, every village now also has a few auto rickshaws for transport. Every village you can find this. So that again is a definitely there is a demand for all these at a rural level. And I don't even mention agriculture, the tractors and other products for agriculture, used in agriculture. So products have penetrated the rural market, and thanks to the internet, thanks to the smartphone, rural youth have wide exposure. They know what is going on in the world far more than what was true 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that also has made aspirations go higher. Rural youth aspire to the same things that anybody anywhere in the world aspires to. So these are ideal conditions. Then, if you bring rural youth into the productive segment, because there is demand for consumption, then you can bring them into the productive segment. Then there is a production that balances the consumption need. So that is how we should think about the economy, in my opinion. And there is, and from even digital products, there is definitely, if you look at the smartphone, people know about apps, people are consuming all this. In fact, this rural youth here often tell me about news about me before I have seen it. They come and tell me, I saw this news about you. And where did you see it? They'll say online, they'll show their phone. So that is how it is now.
Yeah, it is now, and your belief, our everyone's belief in India, and especially where you are sitting, your belief is this audience can be really tech savvy and trained out into a great tech talent hub as the time goes by.
Yes, absolutely.
Fair enough. So we all know about Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO, but how does Sridhar Vembu build products? So last year you completed 25 years of Zoho, and you stated that your goal is to work towards a vertically integrated tech stack, such that customer experience will be very tightly controlled and secure. So what do you exactly mean by that? How does this approach look like?
Yeah. So if you look at our product, any of our products, we cover the entire set of ingredients all the way down to the metal on the top of the server. Almost everything that runs is either our software, or in the case of Linux, our database could be an open source component there. But everything built on top is what we wrote. And this confers a few important benefits. One, of course, we know what is happening to your data. So we can guarantee that your data is secure, and your privacy is maintained. That's something very important. That's a promise we want to make our customers, we want to keep. And if you have data with a lot of players in this, that promise is very hard to make and very hard to keep. That's the first reason. The second, it also confers a technology advantage, where we can actually mix and match components that we have built to create new kinds of product experiences. In fact, that is what we've been doing. A lot of our newer product offerings are actually creatively using technology components that we've already built to address a new use case, new example. And we have, for example, we used our audio video capabilities. We launched a product called Trainer Center, exclusively meant for training professionals to offer training over the internet, over mobile. And that's a platform that is very particular to a particular market, but it takes advantage of our broader AV platform that we have built in house. So that's just an example, and that is how our product strategy evolves, and our deep tech stack enables us to have this kind of product strategy.
So you think like building a few platform level thought process, and then going vertically deep down into
Yes,
them to launch very
correct.
very vertical specified products for that particular TG.
Exactly, and the Trainer Center is an example of that very vertical
Example.
product.
Very interesting. So if I understand from you, and especially Indian SMB is a huge market for Zoho. So how do you look at Indian SMB market, right? Because every time I talk to someone tells me 20 million, someone tells me 50 million, some KPMG Gartner report says 100 million, someone says it's paying, non-paying. There's so much of black box around Indian SMB market. What is the Indian SMB market in the context of Zoho, according to you, from the perspective of paying capacity, especially?
So there is paying capacity today. And then there's evolving paying capacity, because now increasingly as our economy becomes more digital, UPI payments everyone is adopting, then naturally they will want to keep track of their payments, and accounting enters the picture. And at some point, GST enters the picture, because all transactions are digital. So GST enters the picture. So there's a natural evolution of a customer from they only consume digital tools to actually become paying customers over time. And that, so from that perspective, we are seeing India is actually our fastest growing market in the world today. Okay, and that's pretty amazing when you think about it. We are growing at a very rapid clip. 10 years ago we had negligible, minuscule business in India, but today it is growing very fast. So actually has become the number 2 market for us worldwide after the US. The US is the number 1 market. The number 2 market for us is now India, and UK is number 3. So that's how the order is. And just recently, our Indian market overtook the UK market. So it tells you the potential here. And of course, I believe in the next 10, 15 years, our India revenues may actually challenge the US market revenues, simply because of the growth rate possible in our economy. That we go from a sort of a 3 trillion economy, I believe we will go to 10, 20 trillion economy. At that point, India could well be our largest market. So that is what we are planning on. And so the potential is vast. The question is, what is it today and how do you get there? I think best idea, I would say, for entrepreneurs, you have to have a global strategy, of course, in software, but you also don't neglect our home market, which is very price sensitive and support intensive. Indian customers demand and they're entitled to receive excellent support. So it is, of course, lower margin for that reason, but it's well worth fighting this, because you learn. Indian customers actually hold you to a higher standard often by being demanding, and that's something that helps us globally to succeed. And this is actually Japanese companies have always said this. Japanese customers are some of the most demanding of Japanese companies. So if they satisfy Japanese customers in Japan, then they are able to satisfy other customers worldwide. I believe that is actually true also for Indian companies.
Very interesting things is, personally for me and a lot of founders I talk to, and when I use a lot of these products and my friends use a lot of these products, and one question we always have: demanding and entitled for support are the keywords I picked from your conversation, because
Yeah.
a lot of companies building here, we try to copy from a US context, right, which is very DIY mode, but
Right.
either because our DNA is such, or we are growing as a country from a technology evolution point of view. Yes, Indian customers are demanding and entitled. I'm not sure. I'm not there to comment on that. I'm not reached there to comment on that.
I
But
said
yes,
they are
demanding.
entitled to support. I said they are
Yes,
entitled to the
entitled to
support.
support.
And
Support.
this is
Yes,
actually true
entitled.
in Japan, by the way. This is absolutely, if you want to see another market, very similar dynamic, Japanese customers are very demanding. And so we have to invest more in support in Japan. So India is a very similar market, because we have a global experience I can compare. And this is actually helpful, because when Indian customers are very demanding, that helps improve our overall offering, and that actually helps us worldwide.
Hmm. And a lot of user feedback, a lot of data inputs flowing in. How you channelize them to improve the product is up to one founder. But yeah,
Yes.
you are right. So anyone who's building in India, B2B or B2C, should be very clear in their mind. They should be ready to provide excellent support to their customers in order to succeed in this home market.
Yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Sir, give us a slight peek into your product building process. From a framework perspective, how do you evaluate or approach a MVP? How does the product prioritization framework looks like? Because a complex product suite like Zoho, and a lot of leaders have a lot of ideas inside Zoho, I'm sure, and a lot of creative people. Let's build this, let's build that. So, how does the product prioritization framework looks like? How many years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line you think before you launch a product? What kind of frameworks runs into in your mind when you kind of finalize the product?
Uh, for us, I mean, the products themselves, we have a list of things we want to do. There's always like a bucket list of these are things that we have to do, part of our overall suite. So, and that, since that is always there, it's not like the next product is very mysterious what we should do. So we are not lacking in ideas, but we always are deliberate when we start a new effort, because we have to identify the leadership, identify the resources, who will do this, who will be committed to this. They have to believe in that product vision, all of that. So that is how we proceed. And the trainer central, again, I'll take an example. This is actually, it comes up because there are people in the team, the product manager and the rest of the crew passionately believe in that market. They actually want to bet on the training market in a big way, particularly with all the training going online. And they take the Zoho set of horizontal set of services of a deep stack and then address this market. So the product manager and the designer and the product team together own this effort, and it has taken us 2 or 3 years to really polish it and go to market. And one thing that we are, once we commit to a market, we stay the course. We don't just introduce a product and then cancel it out in 1 year or 2 years on that. We actually are prepared to slog it out. Otherwise, we don't enter the market. If you're not prepared for a long haul, we won't enter the market. So that is our real strategy. So, and I often say, it's not choosing the market that's particularly valuable insight or opinion. It is really staying the course, executing. That's important. That that's where we really shine. And we have stayed 5, 10 years, 15 years to see success in products. And there are some products like Zoho Mail, which took more than 10 years to even actually put any significant revenue. And that's the kind of patience we have, because we saw mail as an important market. We have to be in that. If you're going to be a comprehensive SaaS provider, you have to have mail. And so we chose to invest, and it took us time to figure it out. And now it is actually one of our fastest growing products. And that is the kind of strategy. So similarly, if we enter any market, like Trainer Center, like example I gave, we stay the course. And the team knows that they have my backing, they will stay the course. So that is how we approach this problem.
Wow. And is India ready for a make in India, but sell in India SaaS product with the opportunity of $500 million revenue in next 5 years? And I know it's a very cliched question, but still, for the sake of it.
I think it's doable, definitely doable. I mean, I see our own revenue run rate now in India, 500 million in 5 years is definitely very achievable for a really good SaaS offering. Of course, you have to invest in making sure you have the full support experience, and you have to reach the market everywhere. All of those are challenges because we are a vast country with languages and all of those challenges. But 500 million is very doable over the next 5 years.
Sure. So privacy, we talked about privacy, we talked about security in our introduction. Zoho has nearly customers in 200 countries and offices in 6 to 7 countries or more. How do you ensure compliances with different privacy laws around the world? What does privacy mean at Zoho? How are you looking at it?
So we elected a very simple approach. Take the strictest regulations, which tend to be the GDPR EU, and apply that globally. So wherever we operate, we are acting because we have written the code, we have done the processes for complying with EU. Then we are just simply applying that same standard everywhere. Then we cannot go wrong. And similarly, South Africa had passed a privacy law. We study it and we comply with it. Then we just take we anyway have the tools, all of that ready to comply with those laws. Then we apply it globally. All of our data centers have the same privacy standard, which is the highest standard that anybody will ask us to do. So even in a jurisdiction where the laws are not that strict, our own compliance will be much stricter. So that is how we do it.
And you also gave up ad revenue model and all third-party trackers from your website a few years ago. So it is in the line with going with the data privacy thought process.
Yes. So we took the zero tracker approach. It both speeds up the website. The website is much faster as a result, and the experience is unpolluted. You see, it is clear now that all of this is digital pollution. It just subtracts from your experience, user experience. If you want to offer really compelling user experience, you have to take care of these things, the trackers and all of that. So that is why we took that decision, and we are very happy with it. And of course, we from the marketing, all of those challenges, there are some challenges, but we have successfully addressed them. And we are also a company that puts these values first. In other words, even if we lose a little bit of growth, sacrifice in the near term, it is better for our whole our customers and us long term. So that is why we took that approach. And we are in a similar way. Our privacy policies I mentioned, we have taken the strictest laws and applied it ourselves. So we are, and internally we have a very strong privacy team that enforces these with our team's compliance, all of that. Internally, we have very strict audit teams, and we also have security, penetration testing, all of that. We have teams that are doing it to keep our other teams on their toes. So just internal compliance alone is now actually a pretty big deal for most of our products.
So last year, Mr. Honam from Altos Ventures tweeted, right, and I'm sure you know that, want to build a corporation to disrupt VC rather than following the A16Z model, study the Zoho model. He says he looks for talent, not from fancy colleges, and unleashes them against new opportunities. So talent, well, this is where I come to talent, and Zoho talent has been talked about from a long time. Very different approach you have when it comes to talent. So how do you do it? Like, what is the framework or fundamental philosophy when you look at talent slash employee slash team?
This again, I will reference this village. There's a lot of young people here, from young children to young men and women, and there's a lot of latent talent. People given an opportunity would shine. And I look at my primary job as an entrepreneur, and I hope that this is the mission most entrepreneurs should adopt, as how do you surface the talent? How do you make that latent talent visible to the world? And that is the primary. So in effect, it is actually also a job of a teacher or a trainer. That's a coach. And that is how most entrepreneurs should look at their own mission. And if you do that, people also, you get then automatically, where do you get the talent? The questions resolved. We create it, we nurture it. And so that is why we are actually looking wherever we choose to invest. We are not seeing, is there already some pre-existing talent there? We go there with the idea that we will, even if it takes some time, it could take a year or two, but we will bootstrap the talent from locally. So that is what we do. And this approach has really worked well, but also requires patience. You cannot just, in 3 years, you cannot create a unicorn with this approach. And if that is the goal, then it is very hard to do that, right? But we have not had that goal, so we can do this. And then once you build up scale, then it keeps growing. There is an internal growth engine. And in fact, new products come up because we have very ambitious people, the company, who actually come to me with say, hey, we want to build this, we want to build that. And my job is to just look at it and say, this makes sense for us as a portfolio, so let's go do this. And that type of thing has happened already in Zoho. It's happening, and there is a lot of very ambitious talent. And so we can actually build this, but you just have to have the patience to do that.
And I just want to quickly add the retention, because right now the environment is such, retention of talent is one of the key challenges out there in the market, and we see a lot of people flocking from one job, one company to other. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I personally feel that depth is lacking, and it's only the packages or the salaries or the perks which are more attractive. But over the years, it will be a challenge. So you guys have a very different approach at Zoho. So one, how do you do not get into a fear of retention as an entrepreneur? And what would you say to a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening in of how one should retain talent or look at talent from a retention point of view?
So I always ask the question, what have we done to deserve employee loyalty? Have we invested in them? Have we created, have we nurtured the talent? Then in other words, we can only deserve that loyalty. We cannot demand it. That's how I'll put it. So once we are deserving of the employee loyalty, then automatically, human nature being what it is, a good percentage of employees would have feel that real pride and ownership in the company. So that is how people stay. So we have to create the environment where people want to stay. That is again a job of the entrepreneur. Rather than ask, why are people leaving me? Better to ask, why are people staying with me? Why would they stay with me? And if we ask that, then the question resolves itself. That is how I think about it. And we, of course, given the market, we also have faced some increased attrition, but overall it is manageable. It's not something extremely alarming. And we continue to do what we do: invest in talent, nurture talent, create products, and create a compelling reasons for people to be here. Challenging work, sufficient rewards, all of that. But beyond that, the rest is not my hand. I just don't worry about it that much. I mean, I only pay attention to the broader conditions to the extent that where the overall markets are heading, and clearly we are in a serious economic bubble, and where the bubble will go, that is more of my concern than, oh, are people stealing my people, all that. That's not something that I spend a lot of time obsessing about.
Sure. And especially in the past 2 to 3 years, the culture of remote work, which you have been kind of adopting as part of your business, that's how your business is divided in a lot of countries. So how does this working remotely versus working from office means at Zoho or for you? And is there a particular way, or every company has its own way and own rules, and there's no fundamental about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So on this subject, remote work, we have some convictions that have grown the last particular year and a half of that experience. We actually want to build offices, but in a lot of places, and not just completely work from home. And the reason for that is there is a team dynamic when people get together. There is a mysterious dynamic that actually makes people even happier, not just more productive, but happier too. And we have actually kept our offices open for a while now. About 60 to 70% of our people come to the office now. Some office or the other, a lot in Chennai, of course, and also in Tenkasi. In Tenkasi, it's even a higher percentage. Maybe about 90% of our people show up at the office. And the reason for that is we have found that many people were actually longing to come back to the office. I'd say at least 50, 60% of the people are in the bucket where I wish the office would open. Because I want to meet people. I want the social environment. And I would estimate that about 20% of the people really want only work from home. 80% actually want some kind of office with flexibility, hybrid mode, so that they don't have to commute every day. Maybe 3 days on, 2 days at home. All of those models. So we believe actually that offices still are needed, and it's not just simply we can abolish all offices, even in software. Even though the work itself can be done in front of a computer, I actually believe that the office environment, bringing people, all of that is important. On top of that, the other dimensions, we have hired about 2,000 people in the last year and a half. And all these people need training, nurturing, the talent nurturing, all of that I talk about. And it's in fact, some of my US employees asked me about 2-3 months ago, you've been paying us and we're happy with that, but I've not met anybody. And I don't even know what this company culture is like. I mean, all I see is the computer. And can you please get us back to the office? This is actually many of the new employees asked this. And in a similar way, also leadership. As I mentioned, leadership is coaching. And a lot of this coaching happens face to face, right? Because there's a lot of subtle things going on. So for all these reasons, I do believe offices are here to stay. It's only a question of where the offices have to be. As I actually told our employees, work from office does not mean work from Chennai office. Could be a remote office, could be a rural office, but we'll have offices where we will aim for a minimum 20-30 people at least, maybe 50 people in a very rural office, 500 to 1,000 people in a more larger hub office. That is the architecture we are evolving towards.
Fair enough. Let us just quickly pick one question or two questions from the audience questions. So first one is, how did Zoho reach and get its first 100 customers? It would be great to know whether your approach is still relevant for new SaaS companies in 2022.
Yeah. So if you are a new company, it is best to not think of yourselves, I'm competing with Microsoft, I'm competing with Google, all that. It is very valuable to think of yourself as, I'm in a small micro niche, I have 5 people, I have to survive, and I have to find these 50 or 100 customers. They could be very local, they could be in the neighborhood, they could be local in an internet sense where people you can reach fairly easily. For some reason, they have a problem that you can solve well. Maybe you are more cost effective, maybe you solve the problem better. There is some particular reason you have to have those 100 people trust you. The very first customer, the 10th customer, the 50th customer, all of that. So during that time, it is best not to think of like giant global ambitions. Just go hyper local, and I don't mean local only in the geographic sense, but local could be in a particular market niche. And the very first 100 customers for us were all happened to be mostly the network equipment vendors, which is a very small slice of companies, right? How many companies make network gear? Particularly the first five were mostly printer vendors. How many companies make printers, right? We just happen to identify a niche like that, but find such a niche. It could be construction companies, it could be dentists, whatever it is. Go really hardcore on that market, try to be really as good as can be, satisfies those customers, and then expand from there. That is the advice I'll give. And that strategy, I think it always works. Right? If you go hyper local, there is always a business strategy for that. Where that this will fail is you have massive growth expectation from the very beginning, and you have to make 100 million, 500 million in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Then, of course, you have to spend a lot of marketing money, and that is what a lot of startups end up doing. But the approach we take, even with new products, our own Trainer Central, we are not spending $50 million in a marketing budget. Now we may spend $50,000, $100,000. That's actually what we are spending on a marketing budget on products like that. So that is the approach we take even now.
And then the next question is almost kind of you answered, but just to put it in context, how to build the patience in our operations and management, where there are roadmap timelines and deadlines to be met. How do you balance patience with the pressure of product launch timing?
Yeah. So there is some things that take product launch timing. That's an example. You really don't want to rush that question, because this could, if you do that under pressure, you could actually commit very serious blunders, and products could blow up on your face. So that's something that I actually never pressure. The product launch timing is pressure we never actually put on ourselves in Zoho, and no team at all. And I'll give you an example. Arata is a good example where we still haven't officially launched the finished product. It was supposed to have launched, months ago, and then it's still keep on coming. I banter with our engineers. I say, guys, when is it coming? And I'm using it, but we still have a formal launch coming up. But that's something that I never put pressure on any team. That's important, because if we apply too much pressure on product launch, we could actually, end up committing a big blunder. And you see the, disastrous products are all usually because of the time pressure we are on. And that out of the way, then the rest of it, you have to have a sense of urgency, obviously. Figure out this technology. I push myself on this. I have to figure this out. I have to do this, all that. But that's a kind of an internal, our own discipline, rather than an external. I have this deadline for this product launch, because if we put too much pressure on that external, we could crack. But internally, we have a good kind of a pressure, which is, hey, can we show this feature? So we actually do a lot of internal launches, so to speak, where people are using our product, critiquing it, all that. And that is the type of pressure that we apply ourselves. But that's and patience as a culture where it comes from the top. If you are going to call your engineer and pressure, why is the product not launching next week, then it transmits everywhere, right, through the organization. So you have the patience culture has to come from the top.
Coming back to our questions, and lately, I'm sure from a long time, especially B2B SaaS and B2B enterprise, a lot of founders have operations in the US and other countries, and they've been doing up and down. But lately, more and more founders have been moving their bases to US, Singapore, especially in SaaS, and now Web3 founders are moving to Dubai and Singapore again, right? So, are we saying it is almost akin to a brain drain in some sort of ways, or it is just normal business for now, and the founders are here where they're
I think a lot of it is also driven by funding and those questions, right? Obviously, a lot of the startup funding is coming from US or Singapore or Dubai, and naturally, you want to prefer to be closer to the investors, because they're the ones writing the big checks. So I personally think that is the more of the reason, where to be closer to the investor pool, and then there may be tax related other reasons that but mostly I think that is the reason. But India, I do believe India should fight hard to retain the talent, retain the founders here. That's very important. Important because if founders, business people live in a locality, they will find ways to improve it. That's important. So it's not just merely that I get to live here. I also see that hey, these problems need to be solved. The same initiative we show in our business, we tend to show in local affairs, even just keeping our street cleaner, all those kinds of things. So it's very important for us to keep this talent pool of entrepreneurs, aggressive young talent. We want to stay in India. So that is, I hope that that's something that the government also pays a lot of attention to.
And before we talk about Zoho School of Learning, so quickly, how should our education system change from your perspective, schools and colleges, to empower the upcoming talent in digital age? Because where we see the huge gap in preparing talent for the digital world. Talent is being prepared for the traditional world where the attitude, aptitude, skills, everything has changed to a different context, right? How do you think has changed? So how do we see these reforms on the education level from school colleges where preparing talent for the digital age is very, very important?
Yes. So I actually, I personally put a lot of faith in this project-based learning. So learning, particularly in engineering, any of these disciplines, you do a series of projects, small ones and bigger ones and bigger ones. We are actually doing that even not only in Zoho Schools of Learning, we are also doing it in our school, the school for children, where a lot of small projects kids take up. And then the older children, when they reach the 15 or 16, they're doing bigger projects. We have actually set up a workshop for them to, it's essentially like a maker space they're trying to create where they can hack things together, whether it could be electronic circuits, whether it's breadboards, whether it's motorcycles, all of that we want to expose. But that is to me real education. And that could be, whether someone has artistic talent, they should paint, they should sing, all of those. So it's not just engineering talent, but any area. So to me, that learning by doing, project based, is the best learning. And we have to recast our education away from these exams towards this learn by doing. And that is important for our country because that it is that mindset that creates companies, that creates products, that solves problems, not simply the test taking mindset. That life is not an exam to optimize. The real world is not like that. So that is why I think we need to teach that from a young age. Our education system should move towards much more project based learning.
And talking about Zoho School of Learning, so what are the milestones looking like? What is the progress so far? What are some of the things you have changed internally?
Yeah, we are growing fast. Just the pandemic slowed us down because again, that is a case where face to face proved very crucial, both in terms of how we recruit candidates and how we impart the training. Now, the project based, there is necessarily a group activity where two or three students together finish a project. And if they've never met before, it's just a lot harder to make that work. So now, now that the pandemic is effectively over, we are actually bringing this back with a vengeance. We are increasing the faculty, and we are now actually a recruitment campaign going on for our next batch of Zoho Schools of Learning. We are seeing a lot of interest too. So we want to actually take it to about 1,000 students here. We are at about 200, 250 right now. We want to take it to about 1,000. That is our goal.
Now, and I have to talk about this topic, especially in this environment, which is corporate governance and founder responsibility. Right? With so much of capital flowing in, so easy access to capital, a lot of young founders are coming, and I'm sure they are right in their own place, own ways. But somewhere there's a lack of corporate governance and founders and responsibility, both on founder, investor, and board members end. So how at Zoho, you of course you have not taken funding, but in other aspects, how does Zoho ensure transparency and integrity across the operations, visibility on the P&L, etc., etc.? What is your take on corporate governance at large, and then for the management?
So we have a really good audit team, both internal. We employ multiple chartered accountants, including our CFO Jay Anand, and we have a vice president of administration Sivanandam, who actually is very well experienced in corporate governance, internal controls, all that. Both of them actually, Jay Anand and Sivanandam, they are highly experienced people, and we have a team of auditors. We have a really good legal team, corporate legal team, and Mary, and she is really good with. So the what I tell them is that as CEO, I'll focus on the business, building the business, software, doing all of that. Together, you have to make sure that we comply with every law, every provision. So that is your job. And so they have the free hand and they advise the company when what we have to comply with, what we have to do. So we have really good controls. We actually could be a public company with all the controls we have in place, but we just choose to remain private. And this is true globally. It's not just in India. We have to comply with the laws in the US, in the EU, in Singapore, in all the jurisdictions. So we actually have a really talented team doing this. And that I believe is long term. These are all like rules of the road. And my job as a CEO is where to go, but their job is to make sure we comply with the rules of the road, even as in driving the car. So
Yeah.
that is how I see that.
And at Zoho, you also invested in few startups, EV startup, Ultraviolet medical device company, Voxel Grid, Zentron. And why I brought that up, more from a DD perspective, and how do you approach this new investments? What are the indicators besides the business, typical DD in your case, etc. Because a lot of challenges on DD front is coming this year, in past couple of years for our Indian startup ecosystem.
Yeah. First of all, we don't have any outbound investment. We don't go persuade someone to invest, and so people come to us, and what we evaluate is the founder passionate, committed to this long term. That's a most important question for us. And second, are they solving an important technology problem that we want solved? And if you look at any of our companies, they are, whether it's MRI machine, whether it's batteries in ultraviolet and the motors and all of that, Zentron is solving some really good computer vision quality inspection problems. So, and signal chip is of course in the 5G chipset. So that the problem needs to be solved. Like we know whether it's medical instruments or 5G or MRI machines or all of that, we have to be doing that in our country. So that is the first requirement. Second is the founding team passionate to stay the course. Will they be there 10, 20 years? Or are they exit focused? They are very exit focused. I'm actually not interested. I tell them, we are not the right partner for you because we are here to stay the long haul. We will want to take the slower approach, but surer approach. That we are not going to push you to an exit in 8 years or 10 years. So that is not the mindset we seek. So these are the criteria that we use.
Uh, with capital being so easy, and I'm just building upon it. One last question on this in this section, but it is important to focus given the climate today. With capital being so easy for founders in India today, right, which is great. How should they look at fundraising? Because the way we are seeing it is more of a milestone for founders now rather than a tool. Because it's more of a milestone. Hey, I have raised funding and I have to raise next funding and next funding and next funding, rather than a tool to enable the business growth.
Yeah. So actually, when capital is too readily available, is when you are it's easiest to commit mistakes. They grow your team too fast, take on too many things that that require patience to do, but you cannot have the patience, all of that. So, which is why when an entrepreneur should be most careful when money is too readily available. And I would say it is useful to assume in the mind that money is not very readily available. That's a good discipline to have in the mind. And so that way, even if times change and money is not readily available, they're mentally prepared. So that is what I would advise entrepreneurs, that even if even if you have a portion you sip from a straw, that's what I'll say.
Fair enough. Let's take one or two more questions from audience. India has so many SaaS companies today, and they all are catering to the same US and European market. How does Zoho build differentiation? How do you analyze the competing products? So, sir, I'm interested in how do you analyze the competing products part?
Yeah. So our teams always study everyone in the market. So I always teach our people, you have to have a really good idea of a market landscape. So who are the players? Who are the leaders? Who's making money? Who's not? What's the dynamic in the market? That every market where teams have a decent idea. In fact, these are the conversations I often have with the product management or marketing teams. What is the dynamic in this market? Who is the leader? So that is something that is important. Having said that, now look at our market now. It's well beyond US and Europe. Actually, India, Middle East, and Latin America and Africa, they are all very fast growing for us. In fact, we are growing really fast in Nigeria, in Brazil, in Middle Eastern nations. Saudi Arabia is a very fast-growing market. So we are seeing growth across the board, not only US and EU. And I actually think this is a trend where we see actually, for example, demands for us to build our data centers in Brazil, which we are doing, and in Nigeria. So there is a lot of demand in those countries as well.
Fair enough. One more question, then we'll just have some fire questions quickly, fireside type of questions, literally. So this one is when we talk about looking for talent in rural India, but how do you overcome the language barrier from state to state? Most software-based learning or skilling happens in English. What did Zoho do in this regard?
Yeah. This we should not overthink. These are problems that the Japanese, Taiwanese, all of them solved, because a lot of even technical literature in any field, whether it's chemistry or whether it's civil engineering, there tends to be a lot of English literature, regardless of the country, right? So, which means that even if your engineers don't speak English, and in Japan and China, it is true, they will be able to read the material and absorb. That is the most important skill, and that is actually not very hard to learn. That you read English and understand. And the technical material is not like highfalutin literature. You're talking about some reasonably simple English. You really need to know the technology, not English. There.
Yeah.
So, and we communicate. I mean, we have people who are mainly from the north, Hindi speakers, and we have Tamil speakers. We make do actually, and they, after coming to Zoho, after some time some exchanges will happen. They'll pick up a few Tamil words here and there. So it actually does work. It's just that we have to put in that effort. And English itself is not as much a barrier for technology, technical literature, all of that. And the evidence is all the East Asian companies that have dominated the technology industry, in spite of a lot of the documentation being in English.
Last one from the audience. What were some of the things that Zoho did that you now think were mistakes? How did you analyze your missteps?
Yeah, we have had mistakes in terms of, for example, getting into market too late, or mail was a good example where I wish we had done it sooner. It's fastest growing now, but I wish we had done it 5, 7, 8 years sooner. But resources were a constraint. We didn't have enough leadership for it, all of that. But I've seen those are some of the mistakes we made. And one of the biggest mistakes early on, I would say, is we got sort of our telecom market, where the OEMs we were serving, that was great for 2000. It wasn't so great by 2003. We should have moved sooner. Right? All of these you only learn in hindsight, that maybe we should have moved sooner into SaaS and other areas. But we eventually did. So those are, I think, and whenever I always say that if something is a mistake, I like to quickly acknowledge and reverse course. So that is the culture we have built. Okay, that was a mistake. Let's move. So,
yeah. Your views on blockchain and Zoho and metaverse?
The blockchain, we are going to use the technology for some of the products like digital signature, contracts, all of that we are building. We have a signature product, and we also have a contract management along with the signature. So there the blockchain is very useful. We are ourselves, I'm personally not interested in cryptocurrency. That's Bitcoin or any of that.
Yeah.
So I won't talk about that. Though we may look at the Lightning Network or for payments, digital payments, enabling payments for customers, all of that. So that we are looking at. And metaverse, I really have nothing to say on that. So.
Fair enough. Sir, 3 questions. One area that India has sorely lagged behind in the context of technology and digital economy.
Say that again. I missed that question.
One area that India has sorely lagged behind in the context of technology and digital economy.
Yeah, we absolutely need a very strong semiconductor ecosystem in India, because everything we do ultimately is chips. Whether it's by now we know, right? Whether it's cars or whether it's tractors, everything needs semiconductors now, because everything is a digital component in it, and the sensors to all of it, medical instruments, all of it, not just computers, not just software. So we absolutely need a very strong semiconductor ecosystem in India, including the fabs.
3 mega tech trends India should capitalize on.
The main thing I see now, there is of course the digital wave, everything from IoT to all of it. What to me it means is that we can actually spread jobs everywhere. India can capitalize on this because we don't have massive urban infrastructure. And I see it as a strength in a way, right? We have not invested in all this. So we can actually invest in uh, decentralizing our workforce all over. That's something that India can capitalize on. And then that can actually help us more effectively compete with the nations that are too centralized, which is a lot of the nations in Asia, including China, they have centralized it too much. So we can actually compete on a much more decentralized basis in technology and software driven. So if you look at even mechanical engineering, mechanical devices, all of that, they're much more software driven today, and we can actually leapfrog in that area by investing in our software capabilities along with the devices. So, for example, whether autonomous vehicles, EVs, all of that, India can actually play a much stronger role long term. So these are the areas that
And,
come to mind.
and one last question, maybe you've already answered that, but still subsectors or startups you are keenly following outside the SaaS domain.
I'm following the medical equipment, of course, and the semiconductor space quite a bit. And also now, more recently, I've started looking at drones, the like. So yeah, that's again another area that we absolutely need it for our own use in India.
Fair enough. Our audience was hoping you will say 10-minute delivery, but thanks a lot for that. So I'm just joking. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for
Thank you.
having this session with
Thank
us.
you.
It was a great
Thank
session.
you.
Prashasti.
Yes. Hi, sir. Hi, Vaibhav. This was definitely an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. And, sir,
Thank
I
you.
must say that I'm sure that the audience not only learned from Zoho's focus on building and manufacturing in India, but I think you also gave them a little bit of pointers of improving their lifestyle. So, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sridhar, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great. So while I enjoyed the session a lot, I hope that you guys are enjoying it too. Do let us know your thoughts on the session with the hashtag TMS2022. Now, before we move on to the next session and the agenda, let us hear from Ankit Sinha, Sears, the modern tech consulting firm empowering India's tech and product ecosystem. Hi, Ankit.
Hello, Prashasti. Good
Hi,
afternoon,
thank you
everybody.
for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be here to speak to all of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Now, Ankit, I know that you're joining us for a session tomorrow as well, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights there. But meanwhile, I have a few questions for you already. So, Ankit, Sears has joined us as the presenting sponsor for this summit, right? So, could you tell us a little bit about your goal behind this support and your views on India's startup ecosystem?
Sure. So I'm representing Sears. Sears happens to be an English word which is to sieve, to distill, and to make things simpler. So it's such a pleasure to actually be participating in an event where so much effort's gone to curate, to prepare, and bring some of the best insights of this industry. We are very focused. Our entire energy, our entire inspiration comes from the startup community in India. 12 years back, Sears started to join and ride the wave when we started partnering with the likes of Google, and the SaaS wave was beginning to enter the industry. We worked with what are the most established names today, the Flipkarts of the world, and we kind of understood that technology will be the biggest enabler. A lot of innovation happens in small pockets. A company like us, which works with other startups all the time, we want to position ourselves as the tech startup for tech startups. So while there will be great innovation happening, we need to ensure that it is adopted well. And that's where we like to work with CTOs, VP engineering, SVP analytics, people in the machine learning side. And we want to definitely take this chance to interact with as many folks that are there in the Inc. Summit 42 here.
Well, wonderful. And Ankit, you mentioned that you work very closely with the startups, right? And of late, we've seen the rise of many trends, right? Be it quick commerce, full stack marketplaces, and the likes. So tell us a little bit about what trend excites you the most and why.
Uh, a lot of those trends are definitely all coming together. But if I had to pick one, perhaps I would pick video. Uh,
Okay, right.
whether it's video in the commerce side, whether it's video from gaming, whether it's the kind of video that we are using for event tech, whether we are talking about video for communication and collaboration, that has obviously become the norm. I do believe that uh, all these experiences that are coming together, video is kind of just beginning to become mainstream. We will see a lot of adoption, a lot of technology getting simplified, because as we are able to build immersive experiences. So I have been definitely tracking this industry very closely. We are working ourselves on a lot of topics. So if I had to choose one, I would choose one, which will be video.
Well, while this is actually one thing that interests me the most. And now, on to the most important question. Actually, this is one question that I've been really looking forward to asking you.
Okay.
Any sessions that you are particularly looking forward to?
Oh, okay. That's going to be difficult. I have booked all my time between today and tomorrow, so I don't intend to miss any of these. I have the FOMO right now as to what's happening on other channels here at the summit. Uh, few friends here. So Yeshu Agarwal's session from Transact.
Transact, yes.
He's building the bridge between the Web 2 and the Web 3. Very interesting startup. So I would definitely want to focus on that one. Uh, there is a session by a dear friend again, Rajesh from the Google Cloud side, because I mean, that's one organization that we all can always look up to simplify how we have been building technologies, right? So I would definitely want to attend that. There are loads of other sessions, especially with India Gold and Frio. Fintech is something which is again close to my heart. I've worked in that industry a little bit, so I would definitely again. I mean, I don't know if you're asking me for recommendations, but I intend to attend all, and yeah, that's it.
I resonate with that. I also am trying to figure out how to attend each and every session. So that FOMO feeling is actually very strong with me too. But thank you so much for joining us, Ankit. This was a very fun conversation. I will see you soon again.
Everybody, have a good time. Thank you so much, and see you, Prashasti. Bye.
See ya. And thank you, all of the people who joined us here today as the audience. Do stay tuned because we have so much more in store for you. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.